Hello and welcome to Be Emboldened's live stream focusing on groups targeting college campuses. We have Naomi, our founder, executive director, joining us with Lindsey Medenwaldt, apologist, author, and all-around fabulous human being. We're going to have some really good discussion about this topic, which is certainly timely for this time of year, getting into school, going back to school. Some of you may be releasing your fledglings to college for the first time, leaving the nest. So this is definitely a topic that matters. So to kick us off, we're just going to dive in unless Naomi and Lindsey have some lovely banter to share. We were bantering earlier, so I don't know if we want to continue that or not. But
just friends. That's all.
I just love the intro for Lindsey. And that's why Lindsey doesn't have a title after her name, is because her title's so long it doesn't fit. It just can't all fit up there. Overall fabulous human being. It's just too long. We have to abbreviate.
It's too kind. It's too kind.
Oh, it's great. Well, I always enjoy these conversations. Naomi and Lindsey, you have such a breadth of experience and expertise and knowledge on the topics of religious abuse and cults and religious interactions. So it's very exciting always to have these conversations. So as usual, we welcome questions in the chat. We would love to have your questions answered. But we also have some questions just to get the dialogue started. And so Lindsey and Naomi can share their wisdom and their insights. So please feel free to type in your thoughts, questions, concerns into the chat at any point, or if you're watching us on replay, in the comments, and we will get back to those as soon as we can. All right, so our first question is just giving us an overview about what kinds of groups are targeting college campuses. Like, some people may not even realize this is a thing. Like, get us up to speed on kind of the overview of what we need to know.
Naomi, you want to start?
Yeah, I can. So I saw Natasha kindly sent over some questions that she had, including this one, to us beforehand. And I was thinking about this question, and there are some specific groups that I know about that we could talk about. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not against naming groups or anything. Like, I don't take an issue with that. And I'll hand it over to Lindsey here in a second too. But I think what can happen in these bigger kind of conversations where we're not so honed in on one group, or we're trying to learn about a specific group, which we've definitely done here, Lindsey and I and Natasha, we definitely have those conversations. I'm a little more hesitant to go in that direction with this conversation because there's so much happening out there. There are many different situations that we would need to take a look at and be aware of. And I'm sure that there are many that Lindsey and I don't know about right now. But we know bigger picture what's happening and what's being seen and the struggles that people are running into. And so I would prefer to focus this conversation more on that bigger picture, because I think that those tools are going to serve more people better than if we honed in on like a specific few that we know are really hardcore targeting and popping up near college campuses. So that's kind of my take for this conversation. Lindsey, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I like that approach a lot, because there are dangerous groups that we didn't know about a few months ago that we've talked about, right? Right. And so there are going to be constant shifts in who to look out for and what the names of these groups are. I mean, there are some that have been consistent presences on college campuses, I think, that we could point to, but I don't know that that's necessary for this conversation. I think this conversation should probably focus on what are students finding intriguing about these kinds of groups? How are these groups manipulating students into joining them? What are some of their key characteristics that we can look for when we're talking about this kind of group on college campuses? I mean, they do exist, right? So I'm just imagining students getting to campus, and a lot of them have already done this. So this is a thing for parents and loved ones to say, what kind of organizations have you joined? Because what happens when you start at a college campus is often they will have like an organization fair, and the different organizations that are represented on campus, fraternities, sororities, theater, all the different things that you can join as a student are represented at these organization fairs. And that's the same location where some of these groups are recruiting students, having them join Bible studies or prayer groups or book clubs that are related to faith, whatever the wording might be. And some students might join because they want to continue their walk with Jesus or their Christian faith in college, and they think that these kinds of groups will help them do that. And then before you know it, they're caught up in what isn't exactly what they thought it was. And now how do you get out? So I think focusing on the general is definitely preferred for this particular conversation.
And I think kind of setting the stage to start, when I think about college students, and I'm thinking more like traditional 18-year-olds to 20, thinking more like undergrad, again, not like non-matriculated or a non-traditional student, maybe going back to school later in life. Not like that couldn't lend itself as well. But when I think about more so focusing on our upper teens, our early 20-somethings, going away, or even still living at home, there's a sort of natural phase that we go through of being less rooted because we're in a new environment, whether we're living away or we're commuting, there's still differences. We are running into new people. We are figuring out friendships in a way that many of us did not do before because we didn't remember meeting our friend in kindergarten or whenever it was. And so it's like, okay, wow, I have to start over with this and figure out how to actually connect with people. It can be really uncomfortable, really a time of getting to know who am I, how do I engage, how do I, practicing skills that maybe we haven't had to practice in this way before. And we're maybe changing churches. Maybe we're not attending, the church that we went to growing up or whatever that background looks like. Overall, it's just this naturally less rooted, less rhythmic, less routine time in our lives. And we're really creating something new for ourselves. And some of that's being created for us through the dynamic that is college. And a lot of that, though, we're kind of making decisions for where we're going to get ourselves plugged in, where we're going to connect, where we're not. And things can look really appealing and they can speak to that desire that we have to feel like we fit, to feel like we have a sense of belonging, that we have a sense of connectedness, that we're not alone. It can be a really lonely time too. It can be exciting, but kind of scary, kind of anxiety provoking. I'm kind of lonely. It can be very lonely. So again, wanting to get connected, wanting to feel like we kind of have our people and we found our place. And so it's a naturally more vulnerable time in a young person's life. And I want to mention that right out of the gate, because when we identify areas in which we maybe have a vulnerability, nothing wrong with having vulnerabilities. We all have them throughout our whole lives. They may change, but we're all always going to have some. If we're aware of them, then we can recognize, ooh, someone might hit on that. And if they do, how am I going to respond? If I am feeling lonely and someone invites me to something and they're super warm and they're super friendly and they just seem to like really see me as being special, like there's just something about me, gosh, I might fall headfirst into that because it's speaking to a deep need that I'm feeling. And I might not be engaging my intellectual side of myself in the way that I otherwise would, and maybe I have in the past. So again, recognizing I'm in this phase in my life right now. There's a lot of different needs going on. I'm starting over in so many ways. So a lot of this is foreign, unfamiliar, and not everyone is necessarily going to be out for what is really the best for me. Some people are going to have their own goals. And so okay, I want to be aware of those vulnerabilities so I can think well and ask good questions and things like that. We'll get into more of those next steps, but I wanted to sort of set the stage for parents listening. Yeah. Please, I know I'm speaking more like I'm talking to your student. I'm also talking to you, because getting that framework for yourself, because you could be like, I did everything not, I mean, okay, we didn't do everything right, but like I tried to do all the things and I tried to, you know, set them up well. And maybe you have a loved one who did get involved in something. This would probably speak to why. So I kind of want to lay that again as like, here's our stage setting for our students.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've hit on a lot of really important things. I teach first year college students primarily, and I teach at a private Christian college, and we don't have organizations like this on our campus. But they are also exactly how you described. They have often left the home for the first time. Some of them have been homeschooled. So they really are just stepping out for the first time and trying to figure out what is happening. And for so many, it is like, I did not know this was what college was like. I thought it was going to go to class and things were going to be like they were before in high school. A lot of nobody's going to hold your hand anymore. You're in control of your own destiny kind of thing. You get to decide if you come to class and if you do your homework, and how you're going to study and which groups you're going to join and where do you go to church. One of the questions I often ask about a month into the semester is, are you going to a church? Have you found a church, or are you trying churches? Because again, I work at a private Christian college. And often it's a yes, right? They've found their place. And then I ask, are you going to the same denomination that you were raised in? And it's an interesting question to see how some of my students respond, because then it's like, oh, I actually am going to a different denomination than I was raised in. And then I ask a follow-up question. Have you thought about what that might look like when you discuss this with your parents? Or have you already discussed this with your parents? So I want parents to also be willing to have these open dialogues with their students about the choices that they're making and the things that they're learning and exploring. And it can be a little scary. I don't know if scary is the right word, but it can be a little bit scary to see your child pick a different direction necessarily than you would have guessed they would have chosen. But the questions you need to ask is, are you going to a church that's theologically sound? Is it biblical? Tell me about your pastor. What does the leadership look like? Does your group have a college ministry? Does your church have a college ministry? Who's the leader? What kind of experience do they have? And then ask them more personal questions like, what does your friend group look like? Because like you mentioned, friendship is just a really weird thing when you move to college. You don't really know what's going to happen. A lot of times initially it's that your dorm roommate, right? And sometimes you get the best one and you are aligned and it makes sense and the relationship is easy. And then other times it's, I can't believe they paired me with this person. I'm going to die, right? Like it just doesn't make sense. And so your college students are dealing with these kinds of issues as well outside of the classroom. So it's not just, how are your classes? That's a fine question to ask them. What are your grades like? You can ask them that too, and they might choose to not tell you, in which case you're just going to have to figure that one out as well. But ask them the more meaningful questions. Have your perspectives changed at all about life? Or what are you thinking about these days? What kinds of friends are you developing? Do you see yourself with friends that you have a meaningful relationship with? Do you have people you can speak with? What are those people like? And those might cause you to have further questions about the organizations that they've joined or the groups that they're hanging out with.
Yeah. And I want to piggyback on that, Lindsay. I think when I think about different like flags for groups, I think about different questions that I would want to ask my child when he's older. Mm-hmm. Like, what are the expectations?
I'm not ready for him to be.
I know, right? What does that mean for us? So what are the expectations that leaders and even peers like have for you? What does that look like? How much time does everyone spend together? What kinds of things do you do together when you get together? So those kinds of things too, I think. What books does the church study? What books do they recommend that you have? That can be a really telling question. So things like that as well. So again, as we know more about what the flags are, I think it can lend itself to some more targeted questions too. I love the questions that you just shared, Lindsey, about watch me not be able to remember them now, but I was like, ooh, I need to write those down. I'm gonna have to play this back. What are you thinking about? And then what was the other one? Like, what are you thinking about these days? You said it first. Do you remember?
Oh, I asked them all sorts of questions,
Okay.
basically about their perspectives and are they going to the same kinds of churches that they were raised in?
Yeah,
And
the
what are their
perspectives
friend groups
one.
like?
Yeah, I love those ones. Kind of like, yeah, like is your perspective changing on anything? And I think for us parents, it's going to take us back maybe where we'll have to go back and do some refreshing for ourselves or do some studying for ourselves, because they may change their perspective on something where we're like, but maybe it's okay because it's not a deal breaker of being a Christian. So it can be okay if they are landing somewhere else. And so just checking that within ourselves of, okay, this makes me feel panicked. Do I actually need to panic? Like, let me do some research. Do I need to be panicked here or not? And I love the work. Lindsey is a part of the Mama Bear Apologetics team, and they do some they've got some great stuff on topics related to this. So wonderful resource for you to check out if you haven't already and follow along. Because yeah, sometimes we're going to get nervous because it's new to us and we're just not quite sure what to think about it and if it is a flag or not.
Yep.
Lindsey, I want to focus on something you mentioned, that you work on a Christian campus and that you don't have those types of groups on your campus, which may be true in like a really direct sense, but are Christian campuses exempt from this kind of risk?
No, we're on a very small campus. It takes a lot to get a group on our campus. But I don't know that we are the same as all other Christian campuses across the world. Obviously, it's going to depend on you to see which organizations are listed on the organizational list that you can access on most college websites. But yeah, there are groups that can slip in at college campuses as well. So it's important to ask, don't assume that your student is safe from this kind of group if they go to a college campus that is a Christian college campus, because that's not necessarily the case. And you need to continue to be in touch with them, keep that dialogue open with them. If they say that they're joining a group, you should investigate the group yourself. Now, ultimately, they are most likely an adult, right? And they're going to make the choices. And this is something else I've seen in my students. They're going to make the choices that they want to make, because this is the first time for many of them that they get to make the choice. And some of them will say, I know my parents don't like this idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. I mean, I've been there, right? I've done that in my own life. I said, my parents aren't going to like this choice that I'm making, but ultimately I'm an adult. I'm going to have to deal with this. But you still have an influence on your children, even if they are adults and even if they are in college. I was speaking with a colleague this morning about her 4 adult children. And she said it's a really emotional time for her because she's got one who's applying to grad school and one who just wrapped up her athletic college career and one who's going to have a baby soon. And they're asking for help for job interviews, or Mom, can you take a look at this? Or Mom, can you help me figure out if this is the right place? Or all the different questions. So our kids are still going to come to us so long as we're willing to have these conversations. In fact, if your kid does start to separate from you, that could be a sign. It's not the 100% reason why they might be separating from you, but it could be a sign that they're involved in one of the groups that maybe is a dangerous one.
Yeah. And Natasha, I want to add to this that while there are groups that would be like official organizations on the campus, like Lindsey's spoken about, there are also groups that will pop up beside the campus. Yeah. They'll have buildings near the campus. They'll meet in homes near the campus. And so they'll have other young adults who maybe attend the school, maybe don't. They don't always, who can like go there and get lunch or go to the snack center or go, because I could show up at a college campus. I have and I'll just I'm not talking to people. I'm not doing anything creepy, I promise. But go sit under a tree and read for a while, because college campuses can be really beautiful. And so it's not like they're gated and you have to show your student ID to get in. And so because of that, there can be people just walking around and then striking up a conversation with your child. So it can look like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for just shedding light on that. Naomi, do you want to go into more of the practical kind of toolkit or steps that you would take specifically maybe in evaluating, is someone interacting with me for a good reason, or how do I intellectually maybe make sense of someone inviting me into something? What are some of those steps that we can take to protect ourselves?
Sure. Well, and I think I'll say one thing that I want to start with, but Lindsey wrote a really great blog post as well for Being Bolded. And it's a part of our BE Plus monthly subscription program that we do for people. So she's going to speak to some of that for us today as well. So I'm going to hand some of this over to her and then kind of jump in. But I think the biggest message that I like to share with young people is to really slow down. Again, recognize those vulnerabilities that you just naturally have. That doesn't mean you're weak. I'm not saying that you're weak. Parents, I'm not saying you raised weak children. I'm saying, again, we all have them. And so recognizing that some of those are really going to come into play maybe more heavily at this period in someone's life. And so to really slow down and give ourselves time to ask questions, to check things out, to seek wise counsel. And so that slowing down is the biggest thing, as well as, here's the other thing I'd bring alongside that. If you feel this little catch, this little hesitation of something maybe is off, please don't ignore that. It doesn't mean it's right. It may not be right, but it could be. And I think some of us maybe have more of a bent of being quick to dismiss it. And be like, oh, well, I'm just out of my comfort zone, or this is just different from what my parents said, but it's fine. Or, well, this is because this happened with this other person, but that's not the same. Or I'm just really sensitive, or whatever it is, that those stories that we can tell ourselves. And so I would ask, am I telling myself a story? Maybe I need to find out if the story is true or not. So I like to encourage people to don't dismiss if you feel this moment of hesitation, and don't be too quick to swallow the response the other person's going to give you. Go back to some previous safe people. Hopefully that you've had those in your life. If you don't, reach out to us. You don't know us probably, but if you feel comfortable, reach out to us, be like, hey, or reach out to Mama Bear. Hey, someone said this to me in response to this, is this group safe? We could probably give you some follow-up thoughts to consider. So those are 2 points that I would want to make right out of the gate, is that slowing down and that not ignoring if you have that moment of hesitation. I don't know how many times, you guys, I have ignored that and regretted it. I don't know that I've ever ignored it and been glad. I don't think I could come up with an example, because it always warranted further investigation at minimum. So with that, Lindsey, I would love for you to jump in.
Yeah, I think that's really a great place to start. It should be true of any organization or group that we join, right? We should take a moment and step back and be like, is this something that I want to do? In college, I was in a sorority, and many people are shocked when I tell them that. And other people who know me in real life know that I actually still volunteer with my sorority. When I went to go join this group, it was completely out of my comfort zone. And I actually took 3 years to join. I didn't join until the second semester of my junior year, which is very late to join a sorority. But I just wasn't convinced that it was going to be a good fit for me or for them, right? How am I going to benefit you as an organization, and how are you going to benefit me as an organization? Were sort of the basic questions I asked. I actually also looked at, what do other people say about this group that I want to join? What are alumni saying about this group that I want to join? Does the administration seem on board with this particular group? Have they been in the headlines lately? Those kinds of questions. The beautiful thing about college students today is that they have access to much more information than I did when I was in college 25 years ago, right? Like I couldn't just open up my computer and type in the name of my sorority and magically all of the information appears before me. Today, you have access to more information. Is all of it reliable? Absolutely not. You need to be careful about the things that you trust. However, you might find that there's information on the interwebs, as people in their 40s like to call it, about the group that you're interested in joining. Maybe you'll find a group on Facebook that is a warning group against this particular organization. Maybe you'll find a news story about this organization. Maybe you'll find people talking about it on Reddit or whatever other forums that you like to visit. Don't not investigate, right? With whatever organization you want to join. Now, when we're talking specifically about religious organizations or organizations related to your faith, there are additional questions that you can ask. You can ask, do you teach out of the Bible? Would be a very good starting question, right? How long have you been an organization on this campus? And that would help you figure out, are they actually an organization on this campus or not? You can then later confirm that, and you should. You should go to your, there's usually a student organization that is over organizations on campus, right? There's usually an administrative aspect on campus that manages all of the organizations. You should go to that group and say, have you ever heard of this group? Are they any good? Should I join them? They invited me to their club, and see what they say. Because here's the deal, campuses often know when these organizations exist, right? Whether they're on the official list or they're next door and they're recruiting you under the table. They've probably heard about the organization that you are thinking about joining, and they can answer some of those questions. Use the gut feeling, but also use rationality and reason. Use critical thinking skills. Think about the things that they're telling you. Does it sound too good to be true? It probably is. It might not be. It might be the best organization that ever existed on the face of the planet. But if everyone just seems super happy all the time when you initially meet them and they're love bombing you or telling you, love bombing is basically telling you you're amazing and you're special and you're unique and they really want you to join the club, take a step back, like Naomi said, and just breathe. Think for a second. You are special, okay? You are made in the image of God. You are unique. But why a person who doesn't know you, why are they taking the time to tell you how special you are and how unique you are if they just met you? They're not basing that on solid experience with you. And so you just need to consider where that information is coming from. The book idea, asking them what books they read, can be so revealing. And you can maybe get a couple of books that they've read recently and say, okay, what are these books about? And then again, use the internet or a trusted pastor or a trusted Christian friend and say, have you ever heard of this book? Is it any good? And they will help you find answers. You're not alone, even if the group tells you that you're alone. So that's the other thing. If the group is telling you, we'll be your family now, we're going to be the people who love you and take care of you, and you don't have to worry about what your parents think or what your old friends think or what your roommate thinks. We're here for you and we're going to help you do all the things in life. That's a warning sign. It sounds good. It sounds pretty, right? Everybody wants a family. Even so many churches start out their videos with like, hey fam, right? Like everybody wants a family. But when we're talking about dangerous groups on campuses, they're looking for a specific type of person. They want somebody who can join them and then they can just manipulate you into whatever they want you to be. And that's why we're concerned, right? That's why we're talking about this, because we want people to be safe and to enjoy their college experiences and not get sucked into groups that are frankly going to destroy their lives.
Yeah, I want to jump in on that last one, Lindsey, for a second, because I'm hearing more lately of problematic pastors, group leaders, people who are working for them, with them, using language like abuse and trauma to isolate people from their families of origin. Now, families of origin can absolutely be sources of abuse and trauma. Tragically, that is absolutely possible. Okay. It's being used, though, wrongly. So everything's being called trauma. Everything's being called abuse. It's getting way out of hand to the point where these words don't actually mean anything anymore. And people are then being taught, well, that was you, your parents were abusive. Your parents actually had something to say about that in your life when you were 12 and they were discipling you and raising you. Well, they shouldn't have done that. And these words are not being used correctly anymore. It's watering them down. It's making my job a lot harder, which I don't appreciate, because it waters down people who have really experienced trauma and abuse. And it pulls support away from those of us who are helping with real trauma and abuse. Because then it's like, oh, well, it's just a bunch of garbage. No, it's not. Trauma is real and abuse is real. And I'm seeing more of a trend where this is happening for people, again, to encourage loved ones to cut off their family. Because like, well, no, your family is actually toxic. Your family is abusive. Your family has caused all of this trauma. And so you actually need to cut them off. We really love you. We really care about you. We're really going to take good care of you. And so using that to create more of a divide. And so in response, again, I want to assure you that abuse does mean a specific thing. And trauma, while it is a little bit more, there's a bit more movement with trauma, it does still also mean something. And so there needs to still be room for reasonable imperfection. Like I hear pushback when we're talking about spiritual abuse. Like, well, there's no such thing as a perfect church. There's no such thing as a perfect pastor. Agreed. We're looking for the reasonably imperfect bucket, not the abuse/trauma bucket. Okay. Because there's a big gap between those two. Did your family of origin, whomever, or your family, whether it was you were adopted, whomever was involved, whatever that means for you, do they fall into that reasonably imperfect bucket? Were they doing their best, made some mistakes, can take ownership, apologize? Like, is there room for conversation? Is there also room for differences in personality? Like, can we have, I was having a conversation with someone recently. I'm like, can we have like the wacky Uncle Harry and the like, the eccentric Aunt Mary? Can we, like, is there room for that? Like, wow, that person just like always just sits there and kind of stares and looks at, like, well, that person's really quiet and sullen, or that person's a bit of a curmudgeon. Like, is there room for these different personalities as well on our family tree? Again, that's not the same as abuse or having past trauma. And so this is a tactic that I'm just hearing it. I've heard it so much lately, you guys, and so these issues that I'm so grateful are coming to light in the church and beyond so that people can receive the support that they are desperately needing are now, of course, being manipulated, taken out of context, and used wrongly to cause harm. We see this over and over again throughout history. So I just want to bring attention to that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because a couple of the cults that we've talked about recently have done that exact thing. They've told members that their family of origin was abusive toward them, and that they've endured some sort of trauma and their group is going to help them heal from that trauma. And when we learn about what it is they're labeling as abuse and trauma, it does not line up with the traditional definitions if we're looking at the DSM-5, or we're looking at psychology and how they define, like how psychologists define those things. And I'm sorry that that's becoming more of the case, Naomi, that it's complicating things for being emboldened, I'm sure. But this idea of asking people to, or students to separate themselves from their family of origin is another warning sign, right? So if you're a college student and you're attending classes, and then maybe even in your second semester, somebody comes up to you and says, hey, you've gotten adjusted to college. Have you thought about joining any groups? We have a great Bible study that we have on Tuesday nights. It's at this guy's house down the street. Do you want to come join us? Great, I'll give it a shot, right? You shouldn't just say that, but let's just assume you did. So great, I'll give it a shot. You go to this Bible study on Tuesday night and you feel weird, like Naomi already alluded to. Sometimes you just get that gut feeling. And yes, your heart's going to lie to you, but sometimes that feeling is dead on when it comes to what's happening. You get a weird feeling, but you're like, oh no, I'm just new here. It'll get better, or whatever excuses we make for ourselves. I think we do that too when, and I'm not saying all churches are like that, but sometimes you join a church and you get love bombed, unfortunately. And then things come to light later and you try to confront those issues and you're told, manipulative truths or half truths or lies, just flat out lies, that try to convince you that you're wrong or you're the problem and just keep persisting. So we see that in Christian churches, unfortunately, too. It's not just the cult situation. But if you're in a Tuesday night Bible study or book club and they start telling you that you don't really need to call your mom this week, or, oh, you don't need to tell your parents that you joined us. We're kind of like an exclusive group. We're invite only. We try to keep it limited to like 12 people. And then they start, will you come over for Thursday night dinner? Oh, we're going to also have a prayer on Saturday night. Will you come to that? And all of a sudden they're like, oh, you should just drop that other club that you're in. It's taking up too much time. Wouldn't you rather spend your time with us? And now you've spent every day with that group and you're not calling your family and they're okay with that. And now they're telling you, oh, did you know your family actually, did terrible things to you when you grew up by telling you this about the Bible or this about God? There are warning signs if we're willing to look at them. But a lot of times we aren't, because we get caught up in this group singled me out. They think I'm awesome, and they want me to join them. What harm could it do to spend a couple of days a week with them? And I really want to emphasize, like, trust your gut, but also like use your reason and your rationality. God gave you a heart and a brain. Use both of them when you're considering which groups to join.
That's great. Is there any connection between, maybe how some of these groups are approaching college campuses and, other trends or other groups or other ideologies you're coming across apart from campuses? Any connections you want to make there?
I would say there's common threads with all of this. Yeah. I mean, the moves are generally the same. I mean, they can look different, but like the same common threads are there. And it's not even always like an organization kind of group. Like sometimes it's a mentor figure. It's like, oh, there's this guy or this woman who just meets with people. And it was a struggle actually with being emboldened, because I'm like, do we call it mentoring? Because we offer one-on-one services. I'm like, what do we call it? Because sometimes it's mentoring. And I'm like, what word has not been just totally destroyed that's still available? Because there can be just like a one-off person who basically gathers all these people around them, and it's not an official organization at all, and they don't have a building at all, and it's just like, oh, we just meet and we give like so-called like wise counsel or something. And even with that, like the same threads though, like it's the same kind of tactics where there's just further isolation of And not even necessarily like a sense of community. Oftentimes that is the case. Very commonly that's the case. But even in isolation in like thinking, sometimes in feeling, like in behaviors, things start to get more restricted in ways that, Lindsey, how would you explain this? It's in ways that are controlled. I'm like, this is different from, I'm a Christian. I mean, I'm upfront about that. And I'm like, this is different from me trying to lead like a moral, ethical life. It's not the same as, yes, there are certain behaviors I do not choose to participate in because I am desiring to follow Jesus. That's not the same as when I'm meeting someone and all of a sudden I have to attend X, Y, and Z, and I'm not supposed to talk to A, B, and C. And I shouldn't even entertain that thought because it's incongruent with what I'm being told to think. So I'm not allowed to think that I have to thought stop or I have to shelve a bunch of things. This is all getting restrictive. Like I'm losing that personal sense of agency, like that free will I've been given, and that ability that I have to be uniquely designed and to explore thoughts, to have considerations, to have opinions, and not that none of that should ever be challenged. I'm just saying I'm losing my ability to have those things. And it can happen slowly enough that many people compare it to the frog in the pot of water where does this come from? Who's boiling frogs? But I guess you put the frog in the pot. Right. You put the frog in the pot. I don't know why it doesn't just jump out immediately. I don't know why it's cool in the pot for so long. My son likes to catch frogs. He puts them in an aquarium for a little while. He says they're trying to jump out immediately. So I don't know why the frogs like the pot so much. But I guess you put the frog in the pot. If the lid's on, they couldn't jump out anyway. So I'm assuming the lid's off, or this whole metaphor doesn't make any sense. But you put them in the pot. You turn the heat on. And I guess they hang out until eventually the water's boiling, and then they boiled themselves because the water didn't heat up fast enough for them to be like, whoo, and jump out. So all of a sudden you've got a boiled frog in your pot. I don't know what you do with it then. Maybe they eat it. I'm not interested. But in this scenario, I guess it's similar. Okay. So if anyone knows how this really, lives itself out as far as boiling frogs, but the idea is you're acclimating as you go. Okay, so you're acclimating as you go. So you don't notice that you've got boiled all of a sudden. And then it's like, in this scenario, typically you have not actually, become unalived. That's not typically the situation. It's just, oh my gosh, now I'm really in deep. How do I get out? And I have conversations with people all the time, with loved ones, where they're like, they're stuck. Or with people who are considering leaving and they need an exit plan, because how do I actually extricate myself from the situation? And if you're talking about certain things like common purse, where all the funds all go together, you don't have money to leave, you don't have a car, it could get really, really difficult in all sorts of ways. But it can happen slowly enough that it just seems really great until one day it doesn't.
Yeah, we see this play out in many of the cults we've talked about, right? Here and in life. Naomi and I talk about cults a lot, not just on this podcast. But the idea of this frog boiling, now I'm just going to have to research it. And yeah, that'll be an interesting thing to talk about. I have had frog legs, I think, maybe in Louisiana. I feel like it's a Southern thing, but I could be wrong. Maybe I'm thinking of a Disney movie that has frogs in it. I'm not real sure. But anyway,
The Princess and the Frog, right? I don't think they boil him though.
I know, but don't they talk about boiling? Maybe that's a switch with Little Mermaid where Sebastian is about to get boiled.
Oh, you're right. Well, now I'm concerned that you're not sure if they were frog legs. Is it just because you don't remember, or you just weren't sure what kind of leg you were eating? Okay.
I don't remember.
So you knew at the time, you just don't remember. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Another side caution that you can learn
guys.
Today. Yeah. Another side note that you can learn today from being emboldened. Don't eat legs when you don't know where they came from.
You can't identify them.
What they were attached to.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a good life lesson right there, really.
There you go.
But all that to say, it's a slow burn. Okay. Typically it's a slow burn. And we see this commonly in cults or groups that are dangerous. We've seen this in current cult situations, ones that are very popular and have gotten television shows. We've seen it in other more well-known cults that I'm not going to name, but where people are isolated from their loved ones and they make like 38 cents a day working for the organization, right? And they literally have to escape if they want to leave. It's not just, okay, I've decided to change my mind and I'm going to leave now. It is, no, you have to figure out a way to escape in the trunk of a car. And that's terrifying in and of itself. All that to say, when you start to see yourself, if you're a college student or if you're a parent or a loved one observing your college student, right? If you're kind of paying attention to the decisions they're making, if you notice that maybe they've stopped posting on social media and they were a big poster on social media, right? Now they don't really post photos on social media, or it's they aren't sharing videos anymore. They used to post a lot of videos, or you see a dramatic change in the way that they dress or the way that they look. Sometimes that's not always the case, but one thing you mentioned, Naomi, is that it seems like there's a lot more rules. You have to remember that Christianity is a grace-based religion, you are not saved by your works. And yet many of these groups will tell people that in order to be saved, they have to complete X, Y, Z. And that's simply just not the case. And that would be in conflict with Scripture. So always go back if you're joining a group that professes to be a Christian organization or a Christian group or a Bible study, make sure that what you're learning aligns with Scripture. And if it doesn't, ask. Hey, I noticed that we're learning this, but it doesn't really align with the Scripture. Can you tell me more? And if they get defensive or they tell you you need to have faith or trust the leader because he's so smart or she's so smart, those are again warning signs, right? So this idea of you have to dress a certain way or you have to pray every night with us or you have to only sit with us in the student union or whatever those extra rules are, ask yourself why. Why are these rules in place? And if you join the military, then that's your life. You chose that. But if you're joining a cult, they're not going to tell you, hey, we're a cult. There will be other warning signs in place and control and separation from the people you love and who have loved you. Definitely two big warning signs.
Yeah, thanks for that. We've only got a couple minutes left before we have to wrap up this conversation. This was really good information. Naomi, do you have any last thoughts to share about what we want people to walk away with?
I think I'd want people to walk away feeling strengthened by this conversation. My hope whenever we have talks like this is not that it makes people feel really scared. Maybe it opens up a little bit of like maybe a healthy, like, ooh, I want to be aware of this. I want to know more stuff. Maybe I want to learn more about all of this. Like that, great. I want people though to feel like they're more equipped because we don't have to be, even as now parents, we're gonna have some fear when our kiddos, I mean, it's just gonna happen, right? Because our hearts are walking around outside of our bodies and it's just been terrifying from day one. And so Lord have mercy on us as we're trying to continue to navigate parenthood, even of adults, young adults. As far as being like, just like afraid of, okay, who's everybody talking to and what's going on? And young adults being scared of like, well, can I talk to this person? Can I not? Or what do I do? Or kind of that reasonable, okay, like I want to have a sense of caution. But I feel strengthened. I know what I need to do. I know that I'm going to take it slow. I know I'm going to engage my brain. I'm going to ask good questions. I'm going to go back to people who have led me well before, and I'm going to run stuff by them. That's not me handing over my autonomy. That's me being wise to seek the input of others. I'm going to weigh that information well. And so that's just what I hope happens from this conversation. For anyone who is out there, who is wanting more content like this, who is wanting more equipping. One of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is because I've had parents approach us looking for a resource. So this is one of many resources that I want us to create. The blog post was one. This is one. This is accessible to everyone. The blog post, again, is for our subscription members, our month-to-month BE Plus service. We are also in the process of creating what we're basically taking from courses that we're creating, and we're turning them into like one night, 90-minute presentations that include engagement that can be done for young adult services at churches or parachurch ministries, your youth nights and things like that, so we can be equipping our high schoolers and our young 20-somethings in these kinds of topics. So if that's something that you would want to be a part of, please reach out to us. We'd love to talk about how you could be involved in getting those projects out and into the world. We've already got a couple of churches that are like, pilot it here, and they've got several hundred students that we could go pilot it with and get great feedback. So we're hoping to continue moving in that direction. Something we really are passionate about, we really believe in, is prevention and equipping our kiddos. So again, I hope that this conversation is the start of many more to come, but I want you to leave feeling more strengthened, like increased awareness, increased education on what's going on and what you can do about it. Again, we don't have to be walking around feeling super fearful, because we can recognize and we can know.
Right. And don't assume that every organization is a bad one. That's the other thing. There are a lot of really great, legitimate Christian organizations that exist on college campuses, thankfully throughout the world, right? Those are, I'm thinking like Ratio Christi is a great one. If your college campus has a Ratio Christi chapter, consider showing your student, your child, information about that. If you're a college student, look into it and see if there's a chapter. But there are plenty of other Christian organizations who do great work and are involved with college students. So not every group is a bad one. There are really good ones. And if we're just using our minds a little bit more, asking solid questions, and making sure that we're as informed as we need to be, then I feel like you're going to be okay. And parents shouldn't be afraid every time their student says, "Oh, I think I'm gonna join this book club." That your student is probably not joining a cult. It's possible, but ask a few basic questions. It probably truly is a book club. And if you can do research on the side, I've had parents ask me to do research about groups. Hey, can you look into this group? My student's thinking about joining it. Is it legitimate? That kind of thing. Find a place to ask questions. Be Emboldened is a wonderful resource that you should be frequently using for information about this kind of topic. And they're willing to talk, right? And you don't often find that with organizations, because they want to do the things that they want to do. But Be Emboldened was created to have these kinds of conversations with real humans, not to just live in a vacuum creating information, right? They want to help people. So if you need help, reach out and know that you're not alone. Even if you are caught up in a group, there are people that can give you help to get out. And don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lindsey and Naomi. Someone just posted in the chat that they're going to share this on their social media, and I just am so encouraged by that. Sharing and subscribing, getting the word out, leaving comments, writing reviews. It gets this information out there to more people, and you never know who's going to need to hear about this, and it does make a difference. So please share. If there's anything, a call to action at this time, just share this information, get it out there, share it with people with people who have students, with students it could make a difference in someone's life. So Naomi, Lindsey, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you everyone who is watching and is still watching, leaving comments. We're so grateful for your support and for following along. Reach out to us if you have any questions or comments to share. We'd love to hear from you. right. Bye, everyone.